Edward Norton is here. Here is a montage of his work. It led him to 2 Oscar nominations before he was 30 years old. Take a look at this.
You his lawyer, ain't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, with your fancy suit. I heard about you. Well, my. You sure f***ed this one up, counselor. It sounds to me like they're gonna shoot old Aaron so full of poison it's gonna come out his eyes.
You're scared. You're letting these guys just
look,
steamroll.
It's not just them, Larry, okay? It's me. It's me. I am not taking you. Lawyers dream about a case like this in front of the Supreme Court. Dream of it. And they would probably hear us, if you want to know the truth. But I am not going with you. You know what? Stop worrying so much about me, okay? I'm turning things around. I'm not going to let anybody drop a garbage can on my head.
No, you're going to get out of the way. It's going to land on me. I'll see you.
What are you doing, Derek? This is your family.
Right, my family. My family. So you know what? I don't give 2 shits about you or anybody else or what you think. You're not a part of it, and you never will be.
I am Jack's smirking revenge.
Oh. Oh. What the hell are you doing? Oh. Don't smile at me, okay? Because I'm on to you, and I'm in no mood.
What's going on here?
The jig is so up.
Yeah, you're drunk.
I'm not drunk.
You're drunk.
I'm not drunk. I'm Irish. This is milk to me. What are you thinking? No, I'm on a job here. Now, if you just don't want to come in on it, that's fine. Say no, but don't send some third-rate rent-a-thug to brush me off. You can do it like a professional.
I must be dreaming.
Just think of it as the high life, Shell. You got to get used to this. Pretty soon, you'd be pissing on $100 bills just to see the look on Franklin's face.
I don't think I could ever do that. I have much too much respect for what that man accomplished.
Yeah, he's a good man.
I don't know. I mean, everything's gotten so strange, Bob. I look at these people around me, and I'm thinking, these are my friends? I don't even know these people. You know, and Naturel even. Do I really know her? I don't know. It's all... The only people I trust are you, Jacob, and Frank, guys I grew up with.
I miss those boys.
Yeah, I know.
A lot of times we have actors on here to talk about films. Sometimes we want them to come and just talk. That is the case tonight with Edward Norton. I am pleased to have him back on this program. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's great to have you here, and just not to have a specific purpose, but just to talk. I want to talk about this idea. You said something that turned me on, which was this. Whatever you do in life, you have to connect with a sense of service, an idea you're doing something for somebody else. Where does that come from?
I think people in my family have had a big influence on me in that regard. Just a lot of my background, my parents and my grandfather were they were real, social activists, environmental activists, and I think they imbued us all with that instinct.
And how do you go about finding how you can make a difference?
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. I mean, I think with celebrity is a funny thing in that regard, because lots of people are happy to have even the barest kind of associative link, and I think you have to discipline yourself to in some ways find those things that maybe you're going to do more than just kind of attach your name to, but try to follow through on in a more meaningful way. Sometimes, even like having this kind of conversation, it's nice just to be able, because you're known in another sphere or respected in another sphere, to be able to engage in a conversation that maybe highlights the great work some other people are doing, because there's such a disproportionate amount of attention paid to entertainment, and it's nice to be a part of helping shift the focus sometimes over onto great work that other people are doing more quietly.
All right, let me talk about one which interests me. This is called Friends of the High Line. What is the High Line, and how did you get involved in this, and why is this important? Because we'll come back and say more about that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic effort. It just charged me as soon as I encountered it. For some background, the High Line itself is an old freight rail track that was built in 1934 deal with the congestion on the industrial west side. It runs now from about the Javits Center on 34th Street of Manhattan, of course, down all the way through the Village and the Meatpacking District, and right through the industrial west side. And it's an elevated freight rail track that was essentially abandoned. The use was ended in 1980, and in the 23 years since then, it's pretty much filled in. Nature has reclaimed the track bed and filled it in.
Take a look at this. Here's a picture. We've also have other stuff we'll show you.
It's astonishing. It's this incredible study in what nature would do if left alone in the urban environment. But what
every city needs a High Line.
Yeah. I mean, and it was something I had seen from a rooftop that I lived on for years and wondered what it was. And then I read this piece in the New Yorker by Adam Gopnik about the High Line and about this effort that had sprung up to try to prevent it from being torn down.
Now, how long ago was that?
This was just a year or two ago. Exactly. A year or two ago, and it turned out there was this incredible, to me, incredible story behind it. These two guys, Joshua David and Robert Hammond, had met at a community hearing about the issue. Realized that most people were just talking about tearing it down, property owners essentially, and they kind of said, well, hey, how come no one's discussing the creative reuse of this incredible structure that's got such not only a historic role in the transportation and the industry of New York, but represents potentially this incredible, unpredicted space that's been, preserved from the density of the development in the area that could be an amazing public space. And within an incredibly short period of time, they got together, created this group, the Friends of the High Line, and in an amazingly short time have, I think, completely turned the conversation 180 to where the momentum is very much behind preserving the High Line and redeveloping it as a public space.
So you hear about this, and you read an article by Gopnik in the New Yorker magazine. Yeah. And you do what? You call him up.
Yeah, I just picked up the phone. I called him and said, "Hey,
this is a good idea.
This is an amazing idea. I mean, a historically great idea, in my opinion. It would be one of the largest creations of new public space in Manhattan or in all of New York City, I mean, along with the Hudson River Park. Since Central Park, this thing is 1.5 miles long, and it goes right through the heart of, a whole section of the city.
And so they said, come on down, we'd like to have...
Well, I called and said, what can I do to assist you? I mean, obviously financial support, which I, always try to give, but how can we help make this project more visible and get, anything I said anything I can do to get to assist your effort.
All right, roll tape. This is a clip of some footage of the High Line. We'll talk over it. Take a look at this and talk about this, Edward.
Well, as
we watch it. Look at this. Wow.
I mean, I went up on it once under the escort of the rail company that owns it and with the Friends of the High Line, and it was just, I can't even overstate the impact it had on me, because it's like this vein of green running right through the industrial west side, and it gives you this astonishing new perspective on the city. There's this whole history that unfolds as you walk along it, and you can see that it actually goes through some of the buildings that it used to make deliveries into. Small groves of trees like this have grown up on it, and it's this incredibly unlikely natural reclamation project.
If it is preserved, what are people who were in the leadership of the preservation of the High Line interested in doing with it, if anything?
Well, certainly there's all kinds of things it could become, and the Friends of the High Line.
Is this great? Right in the middle of Lower Manhattan.
Right in the middle of Lower Manhattan, and this is all unman manipulated.
Yeah, exactly. There's no great landscape gardener who set this up.
Not at all. But I think that personally, and speaking for myself, I think, of course, the idea of a park is always a wonderful one to me, natural space and green space, but it's such a big, it's such a long structure and an enormous amount of space. There's obviously opportunity for multiple uses of it, and they just sponsored a great sort of creative design competition for people to sort of
figure out what they want to do with it.
Ruminate
Is the battle over then? So we've saved the High Line?
No, not at all. It's these guys are quick to point out that it absolutely won't happen, despite the good momentum, without a massive amount of community and public support. There was
pressure. Who makes the decisions?
Well, there was an important hearing today with the Transportation Board and there will need to be issued a certificate for interim trail use, which has to do with the Rail Banking Act, where cities and states are allowed to claim a rail corridor and preserve it for public use while maintaining its usefulness as a rail corridor for security and
what's the argument of the people who want to tear it down?
Well, I think it's important not to set up adversaries, but there was a property owners association that, of course, if the track were gone, some of their air rights would return and development rights. But I think everybody's hope is not to combat those interests, but to figure out a way for the city to address those people's needs, either through giving them zoning changes so that they can profit
so
from their
it's not
space.
us versus them.
Exactly.
It's
because it's something that will benefit
right.
the public, but also the property owners, because it would increase the flow of people and traffic and life in the area. It'd be good for business everywhere.
You've also done a number of things which I've read about. One, you created a scholarship at Yale for undergraduates. Do they get to go to the Middle East and study if they're interested?
This was
in the name of your
grandmother
or somebody?
In the wake of September 11th, I was looking for ways to engage in, a response to that felt meaningful to me, other than the direct support of the people who were, victims of it. I think whatever way you look at it, whether you believe in sort of fostering relationships and peaceful relationships, or whether, strictly in the interests of increasing our knowledge for security reasons, I think everybody can agree that we need a certain amount, much more knowledge about the people and cultures of that part of the world. So I endowed a fund at my old school at Yale University to sponsor undergraduate travel study grants to the Middle East, and sort of threw it out there, and to raise money for that fund. We've got a couple $100,000.
Sort of engender an interest in the Middle East.
To try to catch people at that phase in their life when they're just figuring out, what do I want to study, give them an opportunity to travel and study in that part of the world, and hopefully just, foster.
Do you have any reluctance or any incentive to speak out on public issues, whether it's a question of war and peace, or whether it's a question of political campaigns, or whether it's economics or health care or AIDS or whatever it might be?
I think that, like I said, I think you have to be disciplined. I think often
because you'll wear out your welcome, or
and because I think there's a downside to being sort of superficial in your comments on things, or knee-jerk. I think it's almost certainly there are political issues that I think at some points all Americans have to decide, that at some points they're going to take a stand, not just through exercising their vote, but for making their feelings heard on issues. Sometimes, for me, I'd rather, in some ways, focus on positive work that I see being done, or follow through on ideas I have so not to just be adding another voice into the cacophony of sort of political back and forth, but trying to find common ground, on issues that people can agree on, point at the good work people are doing, and try to help get support for it.
Part of the story of you is that you either went to Yale or earlier than that, or after you were there, thinking that what you might like to do is be Carl Sagan, is be Stephen Hawking.
Funny, I forgot I said that.
And the idea is, to be involved in science and to be involved in astronomy and all of those areas. And
I didn't have the math for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you realized, which is an important sort of self-realization, that this is not my gift.
No. Yeah, I did. And I think that, life is really interesting because it, sometimes I think, when you're younger, in some ways the best thing you can do is be true to those impulses, to follow your natural gifts, your natural talents in some ways. And for me, that meant moving, in an artistic direction. But then you can find yourself in a strange position where, having pursued kind of just an excellence in a certain craft or something, it brings you around into the strange position of public notoriety or something like that, and you find that, lo and behold, you get these weird opportunities to engage with those other things that interested you, be it, and in my case,
science.
Yeah, sciences, but I think I come from a family of activists, and I see things like this Highline effort, or we've talked about the Enterprise Foundation and the work they're doing in the low-income housing
Is that a direct from your grandfather, Jim Rouse?
It is. My grandfather, who was a commercial real estate developer, you did a terrific segment here with him one time, was very well known for his progressive thinking on urban renewal and stuff like that.
He did wonderful things in Boston, Baltimore, and I think he created the city of Columbia, did he?
Yes, the city of Columbia, Maryland. And
Which is between Washington and Baltimore.
In his later life, he really came to focus on the issues of urban renewal through confronting the problem of the lack of decent, affordable housing in American cities and the sort of attached social service problems that were connected with those, drugs and homelessness and poverty. And for me, I grew up aware of his commitment to that issue, and he created this incredible foundation, the Enterprise Foundation, that I'm now on the board of. I worked for them for a couple years out of college, was very immersed in that issue for a long time, and have stayed involved by being on the board both in New York and then nationally. And it's funny because you talk about the High Line. That's a local New York effort, a terrific effort that is exactly the kind of thing my grandfather would have just swooned over, this opportunity to creatively re-envision space in a city to improve public life. He said one time that a city should be a garden for growing people, and I always loved that. And this is a local effort, but it dovetails very directly for me into some of the larger issues I'm interested in with urban renewal, and the Enterprise Foundation is a more national effort that I've been engaged with for a long time now, that is really working on the issue of housing and affordable housing and the lack of it, because I think people don't, I think it's very difficult sometimes to articulate the housing issue to people. People tend to associate it with homelessness, and it's really...
Or they associate it with public housing
and it's not. It's
the worst side of public housing.
Exactly. And at its core, to me, what I've learned over time is that what it's really about is the fact that it's not just homeless people, and it's not even just working low-income Americans. It's all the way up into middle income, what we would think of as our traditional solid middle class, that there is this tremendous problem. There are between 15 and 20 million families in America that have to pay more than 50% of their income for where they live, and the availability of high standard, decent, affordable housing is a serious problem in this country. That's not just about homeless people. It's about, our service industry people, teachers, policemen, people in the military, and Enterprise Foundation has created this incredible mechanism for creating public-private partnerships and working to enable small community-based nonprofit groups to become nonprofit housing developers within their communities. And
did you ever think about doing what your grandfather did?
Well,
did you think that is a career path?
Yeah, and I did it for a few years. I mean, I worked for Enterprise in New York, and I used to go out and write tenant profiles. I would sort of interview people and record their stories, and that was what really brought it home to me personalized it as an issue. And I think people. Even though I had this kind of creative passion I wanted to pursue and that I have pursued, the people that I encountered in that world, the people I worked with at Enterprise and the people that they were working to support in these community-based nonprofits, and people like these guys who started the Friends of the High Line. These are the people who have really, they're some of the most inspiring people I've ever encountered, all of them. And even though my specific world of work is different, I've tried to stay engaged with people like that, because I think people like that are legitimate heroes. They're the kinds of people who are going to really make changes in this country, and who inspire. They get me out of my chair and get me out of that feeling of apathy about things that seem like they're too big to take on.
It is this notion of the capacity to make a difference.
Yeah.
Among people with not particular experience in the particular area that they want to do something.
Yeah.
Just sort of being struck with a passion for something, and then through native instinct and commitment
Yeah.
and a willingness to do a lot of hard work are able to start a ball rolling. And once it gets rolling, other people say, yeah.
Exactly.
I'm with
Although
you.
probably one of the reasons I wanted to, talk about some of this stuff with you is I think that there are disturbing trends if you look at some of the statistics in this country. Every year the percentages of after-tax earnings in both corporations and individuals in the upper income brackets that are donated goes down every year. I think the net amount sometimes goes up in terms of what we give as a corporate and individual society to philanthropy.
But a percentage of income
But
goes
as a
down.
percentage of income, it's going down every year. Every year, and that's a very disturbing trend. And without getting into the politics of it, we're looking at a tax cut package that is based in the idea of supply side economics and the idea that keeping money in that it's going to trickle down, and yet
Or that if you
there's
put more money in the hands of people through a tax cut, regardless of who they are, that somehow that will generate
works
an
its way
economic
down
growth
through.
that will benefit everybody.
And yet
It's
there are
an
many
essential
things
idea.
that I think sort of, to me, reflect the opposite, that the trend, there's a, I mean, Kennedy said it obviously very well in his whole inaugural speech, to ask not what your country can do for you, but I think in a larger sense, I do think that sometimes I get this sensation that people in this country have a very strong grasp on their rights as Americans, but they have lost a little bit of their focus on the responsibilities for engagement as citizens that come with that.
Here's a theory that I have. I mean, it may not be, it may not be suggested by the numbers that you're saying with respect to percentage of income that goes to other causes. The percentage as income goes up, the percentage of what is applied goes down, even though the net aggregate may be, in fact, up. I think about politics the following. People want leaders, number one. And secondly, people do want to serve. I mean, I think that there's somewhere an instinctive sense among people. There is a genuine sense within, and I think it's part of the American experience, to want to make a difference, to want to do something. And I believe personally that, it is, what's missing is more people being prepared to step out and get it started and exert some kind of leadership.
Yeah.
There is a natural, I'm not saying this bad or well, or I'm saying it repeatedly, there is a sense of most people somewhere want to give back. Most people have an instinct to want to make a difference. Most people want to feel good about themselves. They don't want to feel like that they're selfish, that they don't have a sense of the greater good.
I think that's true, and I think some people don't connect with what they can do, but to me, when I see people like Joshua and Robert, or Bart Harvey, who followed my grandfather into leading the Enterprise Foundation, he was a managing director, in a big financial house on Wall Street, one of the youngest managing directors in the history of the firm, and he walked away from it. He walked away from the world of high finance and an enormously profitable career for himself to run the Enterprise Foundation for the last 20 years because he got tired of the culture of greed that was around him. And when I see people like that doing those kinds of things, my response is like, at the very least, what can I do to help these people's terrific effort? These people are showing the way.
People are walking away from an easier life.
Yeah, people who are proactively and on their own inspiration doing things that are gonna that can make a difference. Once people like that act for all of us, the very least I think the rest of us can do is affirm that effort, get behind it, and that means that means you can't let the fact that there's already a brochure about the High Line and an annual report from the Enterprise Foundation, things like that, make you say, well, someone else is handling it.
Changing a little bit here. Why do you act? I mean, what does that give you?
It's an outlet for me.
Is it
It's a compulsion. It's always been a compulsion of sorts since I was a kid, and I guess I'd say it started off as a compulsion, but
a compulsion?
Well, I guess
you
I
needed a place that you could express yourself, or
well,
you
no,
could...
just almost like I kind of compulsively liked to put on hats and do funny voices and pretend I was other people, and I loved plays, and I really loved theater. I was really hooked into it when I was a kid, and movies. I loved movies,
But what was the gift that you found? Was it something as obvious in the beginning as the capacity to mimic?
Yeah, I'd say actually very specifically in very early life it was that. But then also just to, I don't know, I really, my mother was a Shakespeare teacher. She taught Shakespeare in public high school, and so I went to theater very young, and it hooked me with a sense of just kind of the magic of storytelling. And I think as I've gotten older, what's sustained me in it is that I still kind of fundamentally believe that you can connect people. You can make people feel connected to each other by telling a story, and people seek out meaning and connection with each other through those stories. There's a lot of, in the movies in particular, we've loaded an enormous amount of kind of cultural hype and, like I said, a disproportionate amount of like reverence for entertainers into the mix. But still, I do believe in the core effort to kind of tell a good story.
You also have the very practical sense that the more you can control your own destiny, the better off you are. I mean, you seem to me to be reaching out always to produce or direct or to gain more control of the apparatus.
Yeah,
or the process.
There's something very gratifying in that, and then there's also kind of, as you get even older, you learn to just kind of let go a little more. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And enjoy that equally.
Yeah, and recognize
even more so.
that micromanagement won't always
So
net the best result.
Where are you now?
I think I feel very relaxed right now. It's been this year for me has been one of writing. I'm deep into writing something that I've been working on all spring and summer and expect to work on for the next few months. And it's been
A screenplay.
Yeah, a film, and that's been a really nice shift of kind of working life energy for me, because it's a very different kind of work, and it's been very fulfilling. And it's opened up this year in particular. Things that I've been engaged with for on the side have a couple things have kind of come to a head. This this last year has been a year for me where I've been able to satisfy kind of a gnawing sensation that I wanted to put more energy and attention into this kind of work, into
this kind of thing? Or
not into my creative work as much. I mean, because I've got that in a nice place. I'm working at a nice pace on it over here. It's a steady part of my life, but it's a little more easily managed for me now, and I've got this time and energy, and I feel like it's been a very trying couple years in this country. I think since the events of September 11th, if you lived here, but you know what this country's been going through has been. It has increased the sort of sensation in me that none of us can just float along quite so much anymore. There's a whole lot of stuff in the ongoing experiment of this country and the democracy in this country that if people don't get engaged, the conversation is going to get swung, without our really noticing it in other directions. I think.
speak about this occasionally too. I mean, it is this notion, because of where we are, the two profound experiences on this American experiment that began back in the 18th century. It is this notion, on the one hand, of we were unique in terms of the nature of the values that were expressed in the documents, and for better or worse, and good things and bad things, and where we came to end up in the year after 1991, the single most powerful country in the history of the world, probably, with all that demands of you, all that demands of you. And then, for all of that, there is 9/11, which is a deep sense of our vulnerability.
Yeah, I agree.
And those two ideas means to me the best can't, and I mean by that the best in terms of the best thoughts, the best passion, the best sense of values. People can't sit on the sidelines. There ought to be, along a number of issues, a huge public involvement and debate, no matter what side you're on.
I agree.
You know.
And also I think that, to me, and again, we talked even before this, I was saying to you on the phone, like, that I'd almost rather, sometimes I think, you know, there's an important place for political debate, and but there's at times a divisiveness in the conversation in this country that's very disturbing to me. I mean, you know, even in terms of, let's just say, you know, I'm an actor, I'm sitting here, and
right.
Other actors have sat here and talked about political issues and things like that, and I think sometimes people get very, I get very frustrated sometimes seeing, you know, my community at large, sort of my working community, sort of slapped with this very, very derisive kind of, you know,
it's a condescension.
liberal,
right.
anti-patriotic kind of label, and I, you know, I feel like saying
more than that. It's also occasionally it is this sense of you're an entertainer. What do you know?
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's way too easy. First of all, I think, you know, in defense of people who have spoken out politically about, you know, different sort of events that our country's going through, you know, I mean, sometimes I feel like saying, you know, the Declaration of Independence was a document of protest. Protesting your government's actions is not an anti-patriotic act. In some ways, it's at the core of what the American definition of patriotism is.
And the Constitution was a document protecting individuals.
Exactly, but also I think people are too eager to create divisiveness and separate camps. You know, I'm an actor in Hollywood, but I live in New York. I come from a military family. My grandfather was in the Navy at Pearl Harbor. My father was in the Marine Corps in Vietnam in 1967 and 68. My Uncle Tom was a submarine captain in the Navy, and my cousin Tom is a major in the Army in NATO Southern Command. There is no one in America who is more proud of our military, our servicemen and women, than I am, and yet at times, as much in defense of the notion that I don't want them put in harm's way for anything less than the best reasons, I've spoken out against some of the directions that, you know, or the tenor under which our country's been acting, and people, I think people want to oversimplify those issues too much. But to me, what's much more interesting is, and much more positive, is to try to find that the work that we can all do collectively, issues that we can agree on, you know, progressive work that almost anybody can agree.
Yeah.
That's almost outside the politics of it all. That really is more about saying right or left. You know, we got to get engaged in kind of these different all these different ways, you know, kinds of work that people are out there inspiring us with that are going to.
The sad thing, I don't think
that
what doesn't happen often is our politics don't encourage the political campaigns, or the way politics works in America doesn't encourage the kind of finding common ground or the debate. It does happen in terms of compromise that takes place in shaping minute legislation.
Right.
But in terms of the political debate, it becomes simplified rather than deep.
Yeah, it does.
And so it becomes slogans, and it becomes you're with us or you're against us. It becomes ways of categorizing issues that doesn't lead to finding optimal solutions.
I agree, and that's the world of politics, which I couldn't even
imagine being in.
Well, it's so much. I wouldn't even presume to understand all the mechanisms that work in politics. I don't work in that world, but I do think that whether you're an actor or a teacher or, you know, a broadcaster or anything, everybody's got, I think, the responsibility to to engage, if not in the politics of things, at least in the collective work to continue closing the gap between the way our country works now and the ideals that it was sort of founded in. And I think what disturbs me more than anything else is the evidence of apathy, or people coasting too much and assuming too much that the kind of freedoms and stabilities of life, qualities of life that we enjoyed in this country can't get deeply eroded and compromised, and I think, and the people that inspire me are the people that I've been talking about here, people who are sort of
not looking for personal reward,
not looking
but are
for
looking,
personal
in fact,
reward,
for...
and while living their own individual lives, like I am as an actor, picking up the ball on one level or another, whether it's to create a phenomenal new public space in a dense urban environment like Manhattan, or whether it's to to work on a national level at this enormous and difficult to articulate issue of housing. Like these are people that need, these are issues and work that needs all of our support, and in a way, I was looking forward to sharing one or two of these things because I think they're efforts that deserve to have attention paid to them.
Thank you for coming.
Not at all.
It's great to have you here.
Thanks for the time.
Edward Norton, we talked about the High Line. He's part of an organization called Friends of the High Line. But they're also in every community, as he said, in every place in America, opportunities where people can contribute, can make a difference. Edward would say, and I'm sure that, and I would remind him too, that among those of us who have been given a lot is expected, whether it in terms of resources or values or tradition or institutions, all of that. And there are a lot of other people who don't have the benefits of that but step forward too, simply because at some place somebody gave them a helping hand, or somebody made a difference in their life so that they wanted to step forward and give back in the same way. It's pleasing for me to take some of this program, which deals with politics and Iraqi considerations. Tomorrow night we'll talk to Paul Bremer, who is really the man who is in charge in Iraq about issues in Iraq. And politics will be the subject there, and they have some of the same kinds of issues over there as well. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.